It's very good to be here back home. I won't leave for Columbus until later today, so it's nice to be able to spend the day here in Wadsworth. I do want to make an announcement. I don't mean to embarrass him, but we do have a winner of an award here. He's back at the table at check-in. Is Jim Dole back there still? Yeah. Won November Military Man of the Week for service he has. Thank you so much. I always love seeing his smiling face when we come up and we do various events. Jim, you bring a lot of joy to everyone who meets you, and I'm so glad you were able to win that award. One of the things that I think has capped off the last couple weeks is the termination of the SNAP benefits that took effect November 1st. Now, for a lot of our seniors, for a lot of our low-income friends and neighbors, and for a lot of our working poor, this is a lifeline. Luckily, being from this area and being in my 60s, and luckily a lot of our folks that I've met through the years were able to get together for a meeting on Friday. Mayor Labaugh was there as well, to look at some things we can do to try to mitigate any damage of that until our friends in DC sit down and work out a solution to this and get those benefits turned back on. It's very disheartening to me that, we're walking into a holiday season with a lot of families that depend on those benefits, and politicians can't seem to figure out a way to make that continue. For those that are curious, in Medina County, we have approximately 9,500 SNAP beneficiaries at a total cost of $900,000 a month. So if you can possibly give, I know a lot of the food pantries, Feeding Medina County, the two Salvation Armies in the county are doing a day of giving tomorrow from 3 to 7. You can drop off any donations you have of food, gift cards, money, whatever, if you have anything extra to spare. And if you need some assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to all of these organizations, Feeding Medina County, Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, a lot of these food pantries. They know that folks are out there hurting and they stand ready to help you. So 1 in 8 Ohioans is currently receiving SNAP benefits, and that's a big number. One of the things that has dominated conversation in Columbus recently, I bet you can guess what it is property taxes. How many of you saw your property value go up over the last appraisal? I think almost everyone. We're very lucky that we live in a community where the home prices have appreciated so much because everyone wants to live here until you get the bill for it. And unfortunately, many, many years ago, when they set a lot of the statutes in place of how to figure property taxes, a scenario like this was never accounted for. I think we have COVID to blame to some extent. And also, there's an awful lot of people that still want to come here and live. We live in a great community, and that drives the value of housing up, and unfortunately makes it difficult for those who have been here for many years to continue to afford what they already have. Now, on that note, there are currently about 25 or 30 additional bills in the House that we are looking at to try to figure out just exactly how to proceed to provide relief, but to not starve out all the agencies that have gotten levies on the ballot, because they need money to operate too. And I frequently tell people there is no free lunch. Unfortunately, everybody's going to have to give a little bit, and there's going to be a little bit of pain to go all the way around. Several of the bills that we have passed should provide some almost immediate relief. And when I say almost immediate, the ones we have passed now probably will not kick in till the second half of 26. We are still looking at some things to do to mitigate the increases that you'll see in your January tax bill. But some of the bills that we have passed of House Bill 335, which limits property tax increases after county reappraisals, caps property tax revenue growth to the rate of inflation. So instead of having your home value based on your increased appraisal, it'll be tied to the rate of inflation. We seem that seems to make a lot of sense for everyone, because unfortunately some of our folks were getting these big windfalls based on the property tax increase, and that hardly seemed to coordinate with the amount of increase in expenses. So we're hoping that that will help immediately. House Bill 186, the inflation cap credit, that also prevents school districts' taxes from growing faster than the inflation rate, and will save probably about $1.7 billion over 3 years. We've also passed House Bill 129 that allows more of the levies to be included in the 20 mil floor. Is there anyone here that understands school funding? I don't either. I mean, it is incredibly complex formula. There's also many other mitigating factors that play into it as far as the district's ability to raise money to help offset the cost of education. What we've seen is, of course, the inflationary increases that the schools, the parks, the libraries are facing are very similar to our own challenges with our own individual budget. I mean, healthcare costs alone have gone up about 14%. So these increases that they're feeling, of course, we're feeling, and it's compiling into an untenable situation that we need to find some ways to make it a little bit more affordable for everyone. One of the other things that we've seen is a definite increase in the number of the state of Ohioans that are receiving Medicaid. Right now, 1 in 8 Ohioans are currently receiving Medicaid benefits. This is going to become increasingly challenging for us to move forward with. You know, this General Assembly and the 2 previous that I've participated in, every General Assembly we've reduced the state income tax. Well, when you reduce revenue and expenses go up, the squeeze comes in, and then those dollars become more and more precious, and it limits our ability to mitigate some of the pain that everybody's feeling. So as we're looking for different and creative situations moving forward, please know that I am keeping in mind the pain you feel. I feel it as well. I know a lot of our folks are scared to downsize their homes because of the tax benefit they incur by selling. Now, I know on a federal level they're talking about raising those limits so people can keep the money that they profit from selling their home and downsizing, but where are you going to go? That's the other problem. There seems to be a lack of affordable housing everywhere. And I know I'm looking for my old lady condo, and there's very few choices in my price range. And you almost have to wait for somebody to go into assisted living or, God forbid, pass away so you can get on a list for an opportunity to buy a condo so you can stay in the community you love. So hopefully there'll be some ideas that come up that help us with that challenge too. How many of you live in the Wadsworth area proper? Are most of you Wadsworth? Okay. How many of you have moved into a condo or downsized in the last few years? It's tough to find something else. There's just not a lot of choices. So those are the things, a few of the things we're doing with property tax relief. Of course, there's several other bills. Some allows the county budget commissions to reduce millage on voted property tax levies that they deem the carryovers are excessive. That became very controversial because the entities that have passed the property tax levies, and rightfully so, said, look, the voters approved our request for money, and now you're coming back and saying, no, we're going to reduce it anyway. And they're absolutely right. The voters have approved every single one of these property tax levies. So that has to factor into our decisions too, is these people that, like the Park District, hey, they got a great message. We have some beautiful parks here in Medina County. We are very lucky, and we pay for that. But at some point, people are saying, wait, now it's too much. Well, that becomes a discussion in and of itself. Do we overturn the will of the voter when they said, yeah, you can have this money, but now we're going to let a commission of 3, and the county budget commission is your auditor, your treasurer, and prosecutor, to roll back on that millage and say, hey, your carryover's too high. So that is another discussion that comes up frequently as we look at ways we can roll back property taxes. There are some other bills that would absolutely mitigate the amount of property taxes people over the age of 60 or 65 can pay. That's something that we're looking at too. And I know a lot of folks bought their house based on when they were working, and now that they're not and they're on a fixed income and everything else is rising from a cost perspective, it puts everyone in a bit of a pickle to determine how they're going to proceed. So that's another thing that's gaining some support. I know one of the other reps and I have suggested we take a one-time transfer out of the rainy day fund and give everyone who lives in their home occupancy credit of $1,000 for their January tax bill. We figure that would provide immediate relief for everyone over the age of 60 or 65. We're still trying to get the cost numbers on that, who lives in a home that's valued at $400,000 or less. So there is discussion ongoing to look at that as one of the alternatives that we can do right away to provide some relief in January. And I'm hoping that we can convince some of our other caucus members that that is a good use of that rainy day fund. Because quite honestly, I think it's raining, at least for a lot of our Ohioans. Some of the other things we've been working on down in Columbus, of course, was the 2-year biennial budget. That is always a major time commitment for us. We typically pass the budget right around April, then it goes over to the Senate. It comes back to us because by state law, the budget, number one, has to be balanced. We can't run a deficit budget by the Constitution in the state of Ohio. And number two, the governor has to sign it by the end of June. So we did make that deadline this year. There were some winners, there were some losers. You know, it's a balancing act. Again, when resources become scarce, then we have to prioritize and do the best we can for our residents. And hopefully, I think we did an okay job. Dante, any? You know, we could always do better. You know, if my mother used to say, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. You know, if we had enough money and I was queen, we would be able to do a lot of things. But unfortunately, none of those things are true. Some of the other things we've made to try to mitigate some of the expenses in the SNAP benefits, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, and it was a point of discussion that came up. It was very interesting. They're now going to require, if you're an able-bodied adult with no dependents, for you to work or go to school or volunteer 20 hours a week in order to get your SNAP benefits. And if you're over 65, you're exempted from that. But somebody in the room said, well, if you're over 50, you're way too old. And I went, wait a minute, I'm way over 50 and I'm still working, so I'm not sure that isn't a good idea to get people out 20 hours a week. So, you know, they feel like they're giving back for something that they're getting. So that was one of the things we did pass, and we really haven't gotten much pushback on that. So I think people accept the fact that if you're getting a benefit like that, it's okay to donate 20 hours a week, either to a charity or going to school or working. I think most people accepted that idea. Let's see, some of the other things that actually I'm working on, I just passed a bill on the floor on Wednesday that allows folks to donate part or all of their income tax refund to the Ohio Pet Fund. Has anyone heard of the Ohio Pet Fund? Ohio Pet Fund is a nonprofit organization that was chartered by the Ohio Revised Code in 2004. And what they do is they collect volunteer donations, and then they provide grants to different animal organizations and animal shelters that spay and neuter rescue animals. Or if you're less than 150% of the poverty guideline and you adopt an animal that needs spayed or neutered or their basic shots like their rabies, this fund helps cover that cost. And it seems to do so much good because it gets the pets out of the shelter. We make sure they're not having 2 litters of kittens a year or whatever can happen when Fluffy gets out. And it allows a lot of our seniors that maybe couldn't afford to have a pet to be able to have a companion. So it's just for companion animals, and I'm very glad. I think that will pass in the Senate. Another thing I'm working on is community energy, which works very well in the city of Wadsworth. I'm so proud of those two. If you've not seen them, the 2 solar fields that help offset the electricity costs on those hottest days and help keep our peak rate down, which saves all of us money. We're trying to get that across the state of Ohio. The electric companies that make a profit are not big fans of that unless they can do it exclusively. They're not one for one to keep the rates down for all of us. How many of you survived the 12-hour power outage of Wadsworth? I got to ask, how many of you left the city to go out to eat? Yeah, there was a few. It was just really interesting. I left for Columbus probably about 3 o'clock, so the power had gone out. I luckily have a generator, and it came back on in a few minutes, and I figured they'd just switch in a transmission line or something. But boy, my neighbors knew I had power relatively quickly and wanted to know what was going on. And I said, well, I invested in a generator, but I get this panicked text message from my grandson about 7 o'clock as he could see the power dying from his iPhone. And Gigi, let me go over to your house. So they went over to my house and charged everything up for the night. But it's amazing how quickly we forget how much we depend on energy in the grid. And that can happen again. Our grid is in a very fragile state, and I'm one that advocates tirelessly for making the improvements we need to make sure that we have power. Because you can see how disruptive it is to your life over 12 hours. Imagine if it goes on for 4 or 5 days. And it's very, very interesting. So much of everything now is electricity. A lot of our telephone lines are voice over internet. Without the internet, it all goes down. So congratulations, all you hardy folks that survived and didn't have to lose your minds and move out. And some of our friends in Fairlawn said they were just inundated with people at the restaurants over there, and they got a very big one-day boost of customers. One of the other things I'm working on now is the occupational license review. That is something that we do, the legislature by statute. Every 2 years, a third of all the licenses in the state of Ohio are reviewed by a committee. And I chair the General Government Committee, which was the lucky committee that got this assignment this year, to go over each of the licenses individually to determine if they are too expensive compared to other states or if they're priced just right. Are the requirements antiquated? Do we need to be upping the requirements or reducing the requirements to make sure there's not a lot of barriers to entry in a lot of the fields? And this year we did the Ohio Medical Board, we did the Ohio Education Association, we did the Athletics Commission. I still don't know what they do, and I sat through their hearings. I think they may be absorbed by a bigger department. But what we're trying to do is make sure that it's fair for Ohioans to get licensed and that there's reciprocity from other states when the requirements are similar, so that people can move into the state of Ohio and get working in their chosen profession as quickly as possible. Another bill I have is foster to college for our kids that are in the foster care system. And what we have now is about 14,000 kids that are in the foster care system. And for those, what the bill proposes is for those that are in foster care at the age of 13, that somebody meets with them once a year to let them know that if they stay in school and they do well, there will be dollars available when they graduate to let them go on to the next chapter, whether that be technical school or college or certificate program, because a lot of these kids, we found they just get no support from their parents. And when they're 18, they're out of foster care, they have nowhere to go. And I have to tell you a happy story just recently from the new emergency housing shelter in Medina. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go see that facility, it's really nice. Unfortunately, they've had a lot of business. Because with rents so high, a lot of times people have one bump in the road and housing becomes an issue. There was an 18-year-old boy there whose parents, well, I think he was living with his mom. She lost the apartment. She went to live with a friend. He had nowhere to go, so he ended up at the emergency housing shelter. They found out this kid had great grades. He had always wanted to go to college, but never thought that that was a possibility for him. They were able to take the time, get him signed up, get him ready to go. They moved him into the dorm at the University of Akron this fall, and he's doing very well in school. So that's a success story that changes lives, and we're trying to make sure that, you know, those dollars, at least those opportunities are available for those kids. It's got to be so chaotic to not know where you're going to live from one day to the next when you're a teenager. We want them to know there will be help if they go on to school. Another bill I'm working on, and this seems kind of comical in a way. Has anybody seen the sovereign citizen videos on YouTube where they don't want to produce their driver's license when they're stopped? It's an interesting concept that has come up in recent years where somebody is stopped for a traffic offense and they say, no, I am not going to produce my driver's license. I don't have to. And then it becomes this ongoing conflict at the side of the road with a police officer and someone who doesn't think they have to show their driver's license. So this bill would require them by law to do that. If not, and the reason they're doing that is not to harass the person. They want to find out who they are. For some of these folks, they just don't want to provide their driver's license for whatever reason. Some have outstanding warrants for minor things, but every once in a while it's somebody that has a major outstanding warrant from another state. And this way it gives the ability to take them up to the jail and fingerprint them and find out who they are, because nobody wants to be the police officer that lets the murderer from Michigan go because we didn't take the time to identify him. So I think that's pretty important, and we're moving pretty quickly on that. One of the other bills that I had introduced that I'm not sure we're going to get much traction on requires allowing child care costs for kinship and foster care parents. A lot of our foster care parents really struggle taking in foster kids because the cost of daycare now is so incredibly high. And the minimal amount that they get for caring for foster kids in no way, shape, or form would cover their child care costs. And for a lot of those families, you know, they're working as well. And we want those kids in good, stable households, and we want them to be able to be around good adult role models. So if we can help offset the cost of the child care for our foster parents, I think we'll have a lot more people volunteer to do that. Those are some of the major things I'm working on down in Columbus. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I know it seems like we get very little done, and I share your frustration sometimes. With a part-time legislature, that's what we're considered. We go down for a few days a week. Frequently, there's several meetings going on at one time. You try to hit as many of them as you can. I currently chair general government, but I sit on energy, I sit on finance, and I sit on children and human services. And there are times I have to vote in one committee and run to another committee, check in and go back. It's very frustrating because I like to be one of those people there to hear all the testimony. Because testimony, if you ever have an opportunity to go down and testify before the legislature on anything, please do. Because it's those kind of interactions and stories that make a big difference when you're advocating for something. Because we can connect with that. It's one thing to look at reports and numbers and words. It's a whole other thing to see people that are affected by policy. I think that makes us better lawmakers when you come down and you tell us what you want. But I'm very glad to be here, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has or any thoughts you would like to share. Yes.
I'll bring the mic to you when you have a question, and then if you don't mind repeating the question for WCTV,
sure.
That would be great.
Hi, my question is about caregivers for the elderly. With the Medicaid cutbacks that are coming, there's going to be less Medicaid money available for nursing homes and for Passport, which is home care. And that's less services for seniors. Also, there's a shortage of caregivers in general. And one of the reasons is because they aren't paying very well. It's not a competitive field to go into. And so people are stuck in the community without, the families are stuck taking care of us, and nobody's able to come in at a reasonable price because of this. And so what are your plans to, ameliorate this problem?
Well, I know last GA, I believe we raised the caregiver rate up $1 or $2 an hour. It held this budget cycle. I think it's something that is going to have to be reevaluated every budget cycle, because you're exactly right. And I don't know about you, but when we went through COVID and we came out of it, I mean, even at the fast food restaurants, they were starting at $15 and $17 an hour. It's incredible money. But how do you compete with that when you're looking for caregivers? So I think it's a consideration we're going to have to continue to watch. Because you're right, in order to get people to take those jobs, it has to be financially feasible for them to do that. And if you're making $2 or $3 an hour more working down at Waffle House, why wouldn't you? So I think that's an excellent concern. The other thing, as far as the nursing home monies, there was a disagreement, I think, between the legislature and the nursing home folks about how that was funded. And the nursing home folks, I think, have a court order saying they're entitled to more money. So we're going to have to keep our eye out on that. There is some discrepancies about what the General Assembly funded them and what they perceived they were due. So we'll have to stay tuned on that. I think the courts will be determining the answer to that one. Yeah.
Last year, I think we talked about community solar, which would be where individuals in the community could buy a portion of a solar power plant that would be out in the field somewhere.
Yeah.
And that the legislation had gotten killed at the last minute. I was wondering if you were able to reintroduce that into the legislature this year, and if so, how it stands. And then the second related question is that I understand that in Europe, balcony solar is taking off, where you go to like a Home Depot, buy a few panels and a system, and you can actually just plug it into a wall socket. You don't have to have a contractor, you don't have to have permissions. And the state of Utah has made that legal at this point, and I think it's starting to go around the U.S., and I was wondering if that has been mentioned at all.
The gentleman has asked about the community energy bill, formerly known as community solar. We found out for some of our folks, just the mere word solar made them very nervous. So we rebranded. We gave it a makeover. We called it community energy, and we opened it up to any energy source that is put on the grid. I did reintroduce it, and the House did a major energy overhaul bill, which was House Bill 15, and community energy, community solar, made it into the bill. And then those nasty senators took it out of the bill. So now we're back at the drawing board. It's funny, that's what I spent a lot of my weekend working on, is trying to get the details together to make that a reality. I think absolutely we have to, any electrons we can put on the grid now, we need to work. There were several areas. Now, I don't think Wadsworth was ever affected. The mayor would know the answer to this. There were several areas all around Ohio that experienced the effects of brownouts this summer. You know, we had a lot of 85-degree days right in a row. That's where solar makes its money. That's when they make the difference between having power and not having power. Unfortunately, again, the electric distribution units or electric distribution utilities don't love this idea. So we're trying to wrangle them into line to accepting it. Europe is way ahead of us when it comes to this solar, and I'm fascinated by that idea you mentioned about the plug-in solar where you don't have to sign up for anything, just offsets your energy costs. But you can see why somebody who's making a profit on that is not going to love that idea. And we're going to continue to fight them. I have not given up hope. In fact, I had a phone call with the Chief of Staff of the Speaker of the House today to talk about community energy again, because I feel so strongly that if we don't put more power on the grid and we don't allow folks an opportunity to save on their energy bill, you know, down in some of the areas near Columbus, folks' energy bill doubled. I said, can you imagine if everybody's property tax bill had doubled? The State House would be on fire, and rightfully so. But we're not doing anything about these energy situations, and it's an area of great concern to me. So thank you so much for having an interest in it. Sometimes I feel there's so few that do. Until the power goes off, then everybody's interested. Thank you.
You mentioned earlier that 1 in 8 Ohioans are on Medicaid. Do you know how many are on Medicaid in like Medina County versus like Wayne County? You know, Wayne County is getting a new food bank that they need because they've got so many that need that source. Do you have any statistics or anything on that, Sharon?
The young lady asked about Medicare statistics in Medina versus Wayne County as far as numbers, and I do not have that information available. I do know that it has become a growing problem, but you know, I just read an article this morning that said expect your health care costs to go up again next year. It just doesn't appear to be any end in sight on some of this stuff, and I don't know how we're going to be able to get out of this, quite honestly. Because here's the problem. I hear people say, well, just cut Medicaid. Really? Because you know what's going to happen then? Folks are just going to present at the emergency room, and our hospitals, and I toured a couple of them this summer, even Cleveland Clinic, I think, is turning a 1.7% profit, and they're one of the few that is making a profit. If they're forced to eat all the costs associated with folks who have no insurance going to the emergency room, it will put the hospitals under at exactly the time the baby boomers are needing them the most. So it's a major concern. And I know there's discussion ongoing about how we're going to work our way through this. Because, you know, the other thing is a lot of companies, you know, when I first started working many years ago, you know, most of the companies did offer health insurance. That's not the case anymore. A lot of these companies don't even offer a policy. They're forced to go and buy on the exchange. And, you know, it's kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy that we don't have enough companies that are providing insurance for folks, and now so we have all these folks on Medicaid that just can't afford to get it. But at least, you know, for the exchange, the Obamacare, folks are contributing and paying. For those that can't afford to pay at all, the costs just keep going up and up and up.
Any other questions?
There's Lori getting her steps in again.
So, with all the money problems and with all the issues that people have about property taxes, do you think it's time to quit lowering income taxes in the state of Ohio and start having the state contribute to our schools, to our health care, to all the things that are really stretching people in this state? Thank you.
The young lady asked if it was wise for us to lower the income tax when we knew we had a property tax on the horizon. No, I don't think it was. I wanted to fight it out with the Senate, but unfortunately I'm one of 99, and unless you can get 49 other people to agree with you, you are in the minority on that proposal. You know, how many people noticed the income tax decrease? Anybody? Nah. Well, for those of us that saved like $32.77, I don't know that was the best use of our tax dollars. I'll be very honest with you. I wouldn't have fooled around with that Brown Stadium either. But unfortunately, they roll all that into the budget. And the reason they do that is you may hate these 4 things, but you love these 12 things, and then you got to take a vote. And that's why somebody said to me, gee, unless you're the lead dog, the scenery never changes. And that would be correct.
Could you tell us how we might be able to influence some of those other legislatures so that we could give our opinion to them?
The gentleman asked how to influence some of my fellow legislators to see it my way. The problem with that, unfortunately, is for most of us, because we each of us represent about 110,000 people, plus or minus 5%. We get so many emails and phone calls, and a good chunk of them are from our district. And I'll be very honest with you, I'm very reticent about answering folks that are not in my district. Because I'm not real, I represent you folks down there. I don't represent somebody from Cincinnati or Toledo or Dayton. Not that I'm not concerned with their position, but unfortunately it's really hard to have influence on a legislator if you're not one of their constituents. But I agree with you, and again, I would be remiss if I didn't mention term limits have hurt us. They've hurt us a lot. I didn't think that when I originally heard the idea. I thought, well, that's nice. It'll give more people an opportunity to step up and serve, and that's a good thing. But unfortunately, we're not getting folks. The legislature, the State House used to be where people went at the end of their career when they had a lot of experiences with government and business, and let's just say life in general. I say frequently, Columbus would be a better place with more grandma and grandpas down there. Because I think with age comes wisdom, and with age comes the realization that when any one of us does well, we all do better. And I think that's one of my frustrations sometimes with, I do an awful lot of bipartisan bills. You know, a lot of ideas aren't red or blue. They're just good policy for our folks. Not everything is political, and I think sometimes we got folks down there that want to make everything a fight. And that's frustrating, and it's soul-wrenching, and sometimes it's just really disturbing. And we're not looking for those bipartisan solutions, and I think that's hurt us as Americans, and that makes me very sad. But we're going to have to keep moving forward on some of these issues, because just like the Medicaid issue, that affects us all. There's no political tinge to that. That is going to have an effect on all of us, and especially for those of us in this room, because I'm getting to the age where things are going to start breaking. I already got some things that are a little shaky, you know what I mean? So we want to make sure the hospitals are strong for all of us, and we got to make sure everybody has access to, you know, health care without breaking the bank. And I think, you know, perhaps we need to do more examination of the healthcare industry. It seems like their prices always go up and never come down, and you know, we've tried playing whack-a-mole with some of these PBMs and some of these other entities that really inflate the cost, and it just seems to be a constant fight. And we have to get better. We have to get better, but unfortunately we have fewer and fewer experts down there in very specific areas, so you got a lot of folks down there that are just getting overwhelmed with a lot of information and don't have a lot of experiences to base anything on.
Mental health concerns and social isolation are big issues for the elderly. And I'm wondering what you and this gentleman over here have planned to fix that situation.
The lady asked about health care and isolation in our seniors, which seems to be becoming a bigger and bigger concern. And I've noticed it even in my neighborhood with some gals that I've known most of my life that live around me. I live on Stratford. Is some of them, I rarely see them leave the house, and I worry about them. And it isn't even a money problem. You can always get out and go to the library or come to the senior center, which is here is a wonderful resource to meet people and talk about things and just share ideas and get out. But I think we're going to have to be very vigilant, because I think that's only going to increase. And I'm sure Dante's going to have some solutions for me when we go out to lunch after this, and some potential things that we can work on in regards to that. I was hoping, too, on a very small scale, that the Ohio Pet Fund thing would never prevent a senior from having a pet because they can't afford it. And I know that's a small consolation, but at least it's something. I mean, as much as I get mad at my cat, at least he's there waiting for me at the end of the day, normally screaming because he hasn't been fed, but he's there for me.
One more question.
Yes.
Climate change is a big deal as far as I'm concerned, because our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to have chaos in their lives. Is there anything going on in Columbus regarding climate change and what to do about it, and how to get more of the renewable energy into the mix?
The gentleman asked about whether Columbus was doing anything in regards to climate change, and whether there was more talk about renewables and getting more of them into the mix. I will tell you that the climate change is perceived as more of a federal issue, since the feds typically dictate a lot of the emissions guidelines and the different process and procedures for how we fuel our society. Again, with the renewables, we have to be careful. There's an awful lot of my fellow legislators that are not real comfortable with solar. And part of it, I will tell you, has anyone ever seen any of these industrial solar farms? We don't have any in this area, but out in some of our more rural counties, these industrial solar farms come in, and they spread 50 to 100 acres worth of these solar panels. And although I have not visited one personally, they're very, very large. They're very, almost creepy, because it's as far as the eye can see, solar panels. Now, a lot of our farm community was very concerned about the solar industry going into that area because they're worried about farmland being taken for solar projects. My argument to that is it's almost like a land bank because, you know, the solar life expectancy, these projects, these bigger projects, are 20, 25 years in duration. While they're there, not only is the farmer getting some money off their land, and typically they put the solar panels on farmland that isn't producing, it gives them a little bit of money so they can keep the farmland in their family's hand, but also they can graze livestock. There's a lot of apiary pursuits that can go on. There's even some agricultural pursuits that they can grow under the solar panels. For me, it seems like a win-win. But it is a tough sell to some members of our farming community. I think it's going to continue to be an idea that's discussed basically because it works so well on some of our European countries. So I think it's something we're going to have to continue to talk about. The bigger farms, I think, can be a little discerning. That's why community energy, my bill, is the smaller fields. We have a couple of them in the Wadsworth area that work very, very well for us. And probably 95% of the population don't even know they're there. So hopefully we'll be able to have some more progressive discussion on this. I think one thing we have learned, especially with these data centers and this AI, those are huge, huge power users. They're such big power users that a couple of these data centers that are coming in they're doing, if you ever hear anyone talk about behind the meter, they're building their own energy generation source. They don't intend to put any of that power on the grid. That is just for their usage, because they realize they're not going to be able to keep drawing all that power off the grid. Otherwise, we're all going to be sitting in the dark while they're working. So obviously, people know this is a problem. We just got to keep on and keep the issue in front of people. Thanks. Anyone else? No.
Sharon and I'm sure a lot of you here
No.
Sharon from a long time. And I just want to say that our son Eric, who was about 17, he worked on an early campaign for her. And the night before the election, I said, well, should I vote for her? And he said, yes, she cares about people. So I just want to thank you, Sharon, for all the years that you have served our community.
Fran, thank you so much. You know, your son had a very special place in my heart. That first campaign was a doozy, and if it wasn't for him and a few others that stepped forward, I certainly wouldn't have been successful. And you know, I got to be honest with you, I never saw this in my future. This was not something that I ever said, gee, when I grow up, I want to be this or that, you know. It's, I've been very, very blessed, and you folks are the ones that send me down there, but I think probably the thing that is maybe the happiest is we have not had a state representative from Wadsworth in about 4 decades. The last one we had was Jackson Hall's dad. Does anyone remember Jackson Hall? It was his father was the last state rep we had. So to be able to represent Wadsworth down there has meant so much to me. And luckily, we've been able to bring some money home for some really nice projects, and that has made me very happy. So thank you very much, Fran. Thanks.
Representative Ray, on behalf of all of our seniors here at the Soprema Senior Center, thank you for your service, for your passion for the Wadsworth community and all of the people that you represent. And we cannot thank you enough. And we are very fortunate, like you pointed out, to have you right here as a Wadsworth citizen as well. So thank you for spending your time with us today. I wanted to invite everybody, mark your calendar, on Monday, November 17th, we are having a special program sponsored by the Wadsworth Older Adults Foundation called Chat with Matt Hiscock. And we have our city's own service director that is coming. He is going to be talking about Wadsworth, answering questions, and the Wadsworth Older Adults Foundation, they're going to be sponsoring some pastries from the cafe. So please mark your calendar. That's Monday, November 17th at 10 o'clock. And we're looking forward to having you all back for that. And again, thank you for the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. Dante and Marvin are here representing, and the The Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging is so involved with our senior center. We have a family and caregiver grant, like he had mentioned. They help sponsor our big expo. Many of you were just here for our Senior and Caregiver Expo, as well as educational programs throughout the year. So thank you for all you do and for sponsoring the program today. Any final words? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. And again, thank you, Representative Sharon Ray.
Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.